Hi, I'm Chris Cooper. Welcome to the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Thanks for joining us. All fall, we've been telling you not to waste your leaves by bagging them and putting them on the curb. Today, we're going to help you get started composting them. And Mr. D is here with tips on planting and growing fruit, including grapes, muscadines, and more. All that and more is just ahead on the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South, so stay with us.
This is a production of WKNO Memphis. Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Goodwin's Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi, welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Mr. Jim Voges. Mr. Voges is a master gardener right here in Shelby County, and Mr. D is with us. Thanks for joining me.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here, Chris.
All right, the leaves have fallen, okay? So now let's talk about what do we need to do with these leaves. So let's talk about composting. So what is composting, Mr. Voges?
All right. Everything that's alive, plant and animal life, dies. And when it dies, it decays. And composting is simply the managed decomposition of this organic matter. I mean, it's that simple. It's assisting nature in recycling organic matter.
I like that, recycling organic matter. Okay.
Compost happens.
It just happens.
It happens no matter what.
No matter what. So why would anybody want to compost anyway?
Because the result of composting is a thing we call humus. And when you take humus and use it as an amendment to your soil or a mulch, it stabilizes the soil, it acts as an excellent conditioner, and it holds nutrients in the soil even better than the natural soil. And therefore it acts like a slow release fertilizer.
Wow.
And it's very inexpensive because you made it yourself.
Right. Inexpensive is good. All right, but look, people always say it's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, does it?
You know, it can be as simple as just throwing stuff out in the yard in a pile, and that's composting.
Okay.
Or if you want to get really good at it, or maybe good isn't the right word, but if you really want to get into composting, then you can get yourself a tumbler and you can tumble it to mix it up frequently. You can build bins out of old crates or out of concrete blocks or whatever. You can make it as simple or as complex as you want to make it. It all depends on your time and how much time you want to put into it.
Okay. So what are some of the things that you can compost?
Well, there's a whole list of things, and they're categorized by browns and greens. Browns are things that have a lot of carbon in them. They're usually the result of wood products, anything from wood chips to paper. Leaves have a lot of lignin in them from the trees, and these things have a lot of carbon in them. And then along with that, you need what is referred to as greens. Greens are things that have a lot of nitrogen in them, and think protein. Anything with protein is going to have a lot of nitrogen in it. So you mix the carbon and the nitrogen and you get composting, which means you can take almost anything that was living matter and put it into this compost pile.
Wow. So does it matter how many greens and browns you have? Because that, that's a standard question.
Well, greens, for example, if it's grass, if you get a big pile of grass with hardly anything else with it, it's going to get slimy and smelly. If you have a lot of leaves and no greens in with it, nothing with a lot of nitrogen, it's going to take forever to compost. So yes, there is a happy medium. Technically, they say 30 to 1. You need 30 times more browns, for example, leaves, than you do, say, grass or something with a lot of protein in it. But you know, any combination that's reasonable will work. You don't have to get that technical.
Okay, not that technical.
Right. If you have just leaves, it will compost, but it's going to take a long time.
Okay. Now, what are some things you shouldn't compost?
Well, there's a number of things. For example, pet and human manures should not be composted because being meat eaters, they can transfer disease that can affect humans. There's certain trees and plants, for example, black walnut. Every single part of the black walnut tree puts out a chemical called juglin, and it is a killer, like a herbicide to almost anything else except another black walnut. You don't want to put diseased plants in there, and you don't want to put things that have already gone to seed.
Okay.
Now, there's an exception to that. It's okay to put things that have not gone to seed or have gone to seed, but you better get that compost pile really hot in order to kill those seeds. If you don't, you're going to have a wonderful place for weeds to grow, and that kind of defeats the purpose of the whole thing.
So how hot are we talking about?
160 degrees. And there are thermometers that are about yay long that you can stick in the pile and you can measure the temperature. And when it gets up around 160, 65 degrees, it'll kill all those weed seeds.
Basically, silage, you're ensiling. An ensiling process is going on inside that compost bin. It's heating and the
You've just
process.
taught me something, Mike.
Yeah, that's what happened with silage. And
Okay.
So how do you get it that hot, since we're talking about, how do you?
Well, it takes two additional things.
Okay.
It takes air and water.
Right.
And the way we get the air into the pile, I'm talking in terms of a compost pile.
Okay.
The way you get air into it is by turning it periodically.
Right.
If you don't turn it, it'll still compost, but it'll take a long time. But by turning it every few days, you get oxygen into that pile,
Right.
and the oxygen helps build up of bacteria, and it just decomposes quicker.
Okay.
You also want it to be moist, not wet, but moist. Take a handful of it and squeeze it, and you ought to be able to squeeze out just a few drops of water. You want it to be damp, but not soaking wet.
Okay.
And the water and the air combined with the carbon and the nitrogen is composting.
Wow.
And it can be just as simple as you want to make it, or you can get really technical and go for the you know, you can compost in a matter of a few days.
Right.
Or it can take a year.
Okay.
It all depends on how much
much
time
you wanna put into
you want
it,
to put into it.
Okay.
And one other point I'd like to make.
Okay.
The more different kinds of things you put in your compost pile, the higher the quality of humus that you're producing. The more different kinds of micronutrients that will be in that humus that you're going to use as a soil amendment or as a mulch. So you want to put as many of the things that are valid to use into that pile as you possibly can.
Wow. So how do people get more information about composting?
There's a website, www.mastercomposter.com. And let me repeat it, www.mastercomposter, and that's all one word, .com. And there is a ton of information on that website on any kind of composting you want to do, from simple to very complex. It also has information about worm composting, which a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah, the black gold is what they call it.
Black gold.
Thank you, Mr. Voges, for that good information. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. D, talk about grapes and muscadines and some of our other fruits.
Okay. Let's talk more about muscadines.
All right, let's
and
do that.
grapes. Muscadines do better in this area.
Okay.
Grapes have a problem bunch grapes have a problem called Pierce's disease. It's
Yeah, I've
spread
heard
by a
that.
leafhopper. There are some varieties of grapes that might have some resistance, but muscadines just do better in this area. They're native. Wild muscadines are native to this area. And if you can go with something that's native to this area, you'll be a lot better off.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about muscadines. Muscadines are been around for a long time. The first named variety of muscadine is the Scuppernong variety. Many people think that all muscadines are Scuppernongs. They'll call them Scuppernong. Scuppernong is one variety of muscadines. It was discovered along the Scuppernong River in North Carolina, northeastern North Carolina, in 1810.
Wow.
So the Scuppernong, it's a female variety, a large bronze fruit, an excellent muscadine. And but muscadines, there are two types of muscadines. There are female varieties that require a cross-pollinator.
Okay.
And then there are self-fruitful varieties that will pollinate themselves.
Okay.
So it's not a male and a female situation. If you have the self-fruitful varieties, you don't need a pollinator. You could have one self-fruitful variety and have muscadines. Most of the self-fruitful ones, however, tend to have smaller fruit.
Oh, okay.
There are three of them that are very cold hardy that you probably would need to use in this area for a pollinator, and it's Carlos and Magnolia and Sterling. Those are three self-fruitful varieties that are very cold hardy and would be good pollinators. The fruit's good.
Okay.
The fruit is good, but it's not
Just, well,
as nice as some of these large female varieties. But there are literally hundreds of varieties of muscadines that would do well in this area. The Scuppernong that I mentioned is a good female variety. Higgins, Hunt, I'm looking at a table, and this publication is put out by Mississippi State University, and that is a good website to go to get muscadine information. There are a lot of commercial muscadine producers down in Mississippi, but it has the cultivars and their characteristics, which is whether they're female or self-fruitful, the size of the berry, the color of the berry, even cold hardiness on here. And so I would encourage you, if you're interested in growing muscadines, that you check that out.
so while you look for that, what about soil type?
Soil
And
type,
pH?
it needs, as with most fruits, except blueberries,
Yeah.
it needs a high pH,
Okay.
pH between 6.5 and 7. High pH is what you need. You need to, if you're going to grow muscadines, you really need to be thinking about buying them, ordering them, and planting them. You can plant them later in the winter, but you need to go in and start thinking about that. And I'm quickly looking at spacings for a family of 5. Let's see, how many muscadines do they recommend? 4 to 6 muscadines is recommended. But the spacings with muscadines is kind of different. It's I think 25 by 12 if you have them in rows. And most of the time when you space something, you have the rows, the distance between the rows is wider than the distance within the row. But with muscadines, that's not the case, because these muscadines will run, 10 feet, at least 10 feet each way. 10 to 12 feet each way. So at least have them 20 feet apart within the row. And then the rows need to be 12 feet apart because they can get pretty big.
Right.
You don't have to worry about your trellis system the first couple of years that you have muscadines. So you can go on and plant them at the right distance, and get your soil ready, make sure your pH is right, and then you can a couple of years later you can go ahead and start, you put your trellis up and you drop a string and you train the vine to go up to your trellis, to your wire, and when it reaches the wire, you snip it, and wherever you snip it, you force it to go both ways, and when it gets to the end of your 20-25 feet, you snip it again, And basically that's how you control the size of a muscadine. They do require pretty drastic pruning every year. You'll take each runner, maybe 6-8 feet long. You'll bring it all the way back to where it came out of the plant, and only leave a couple of buds on it. Muscadine's fruit on current season's growth that comes from 1-year-old wood. So if you prune it so drastically that you take off all of the 1-year-old wood, which some people do, you have no fruit.
Yeah, you're not gonna
Beautiful
have any.
plant, beautiful leaves, but no fruit. So current season's growth on 1-year-old wood. Very interesting plant. They do well here. They do not like Roundup or glyphosate products. Do not use that underneath these plants.
Okay.
We don't, you can go with crimson clover cover crops and things like that, which will add nitrogen to the soil. And I've known of commercial growers that pretty well fulfill all of their nitrogen needs by planting, crimson clover or red clover in the wintertime and it also helps control weeds. Don't mulch. We don't mulch because there's problems with grape root borers, which can be a problem associated with mulch.
Okay. Mr. D, I heard you say that you order these things. Are any of these varieties available locally as a rule?
You generally can find some muscadine varieties sometimes at some of the local nurseries, and that's fine. And I'm not the only thing that you need to be careful with is you need to make sure that you get varieties that are more cold hardy, because muscadines grow all the way to the Gulf Coast, and there are some varieties that are very sensitive to cold, and they can freeze out. That would be the only thing. So if they have the varieties that you need, then yes, you can get them locally.
Yeah, and some of the specialty nurseries, may have that. And you just have them to order it for you. They can do that as well. Right. All right, thank you, Mr. Deere. We appreciate that information. We can tell that you know a lot about those muscadines there. So we
like
muscadines.
That. And we haven't even talked about blackberries or other things.
We'll get to it another time.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, here's our Q&A session here. And Mr. Voges, we want you to jump in there with us, okay? We have a viewer question and a photo from Natalie. I noticed this thing growing at the base of my oak tree. It's very, very hard, not soft like a mushroom. Is this some kind of fungus? Will it hurt the tree? And you can see it there on the screen. Guess what that is?
It doesn't look good, does it?
Doesn't look good. It's called the weeping polypore. Weeping polypore. And if you have that at the base of your mature oak trees, it's a bad thing. Butt rot, root rot. So that can be a potential hazard. There's no treatment for it. It's bad.
That's the tip of an iceberg, isn't it?
Yeah, and let me caution one thing about particularly oaks. There's another fungus called Ganoderma that's real common around here. A root rot will often decay the tree from the bottom up inside the tree, and yet the outside will look fine. And you can have a tree that is half hollowed out and therefore subject to being broken in two in a high wind and not even know it. So if you see that on your tree, if you see these fungi growing at the base of a tree, you need to have somebody come out and look at it.
Yeah, need to have a certified arborist like yourself.
Get an ISA certified arborist to come out and determine if that decay has gone up that much in the tree. It's eventually going to take the tree down.
Yes.
Better that you take it down first.
Yes, than Mother Nature, that's for sure. But that is a potential hazard, and there is no treatment. So there you have it, Natalie. It's not good news. Sorry. All right, here's our next question. Something is causing my red maple to die. I see what looks to be sawdust at the base of the tree. What could be causing this? And we start with Mr. D. What do you think that might be?
I think we need to let our certified
we're going to get to him. He's ready to jump in there.
It's a borer.
Yeah,
it sounds like you have
a borer.
It's a borer insect. And there are two main borers that will get into trees like this, and they're normally secondary infections, but there's a flat-headed borer, and the entrance holes or exit holes are D-shaped if it's the flat-headed borer. But there's also a round-headed borer And so if you have round holes, then it's the round-headed borer.
Yeah.
But both of these insects are secondary insects. Normally a tree that's been struck by lightning, a tree that's been, out in the woods, you commonly see it in trees that were hit with a dozer or a skidder that was damaged. A tree that has had mulch mountains piled up against the base of it, that's had dirt filled in up around the base of the tree. You commonly
Thank
see
you
that.
for that, Mike.
That is a common, and so the borers aren't killing the tree. Something else is killing the tree. They're just going in there as a secondary infection. And I would be interested in, I did mention lightning. Lightning strikes sometimes can, especially with pine trees. Hardwoods tend to be more, they can tolerate a lightning strike better than a softwood, than a pine tree, I think. But what do you think, Jim?
All right, Mr. Bogue, now we're going to talk to our certified arborist here. So,
Well, and I agree with everything
I
Mike
do
said.
too.
And what the next step that probably happens, first you have the tree that's under stress, or it gets injured somehow. Then you have borers come in, and then it's not unusual to see carpenter ants come in where those borers were, clean out the sawdust from inside the tree, and they make their nest in the tree.
Wow.
Now, ants they're not parasitic to the tree. They will not eat the tree, but they use it as a nest.
Okay.
And by the time you see carpenter ants in your tree,
It's too late at that point.
that tree is well on its way. Another case where you need to call somebody in to really take a look at it.
Wow. Yeah, so that tree's pretty much, stressed and, it's on the way out for the most part.
I'm recommending firewood, cut it, split it, burn it in the fireplace. That nice snap, crackle, pop in the fireplace might be some of those borers popping when the heat hits it.
It very well could be.
Which gets back to a general statement that I like to make, that if you keep a tree healthy, it will not be under stress, and it's less susceptible to these kind of things. But if you damage the tree, or if it's not healthy, then you can just expect problems.
All right, here's our next question. Why didn't my pecan tree bear any pecans this year, Mr. D? You know about those pecans, being down in Mobile County in Alabama.
Pecan man there.
He knows about those pecans. Why didn't it bear?
There are a couple of things that could be a problem. The main problem that I saw with pecans this year is we had a wet summer.
Yeah.
And the number one disease in pecans in the southeast United States is a disease called pecan scab.
Yeah.
And pecan scab, it's a fungal organism that causes the little nutlets to be covered. They'll turn black. The leaves, there'll be black spots on the leaves. And if it occurs earlier enough in the year, it will cause the pecan to throw those nuts off, and you won't have any pecans. And I think that's what the problem is right now. I've even seen pecans that it occurred later in the year, and the nuts are almost mature, but then they're just bad. The shuck is covered with black instead of the shuck being a healthy green color like it's supposed to be. That shuck's important for the nutrition of the pecan, and that's probably what the problem is, pecan scab.
Okay.
Most of the older varieties that we have, Stewart is probably the number one variety of an older pecan tree around here. An improved variety is susceptible to scab. In 1925, it was resistant to pecan scab. The organism has evolved over the years to where it can attack Stewart's. There are some varieties. Elliott is an old variety, little pecan, high quality nut that is resistant to scab and naturally resistant. And so if you have Elliott's with a little hard shell pecan, then you may have pecans. And then there's another deal with pecans. They tend to have a phenomena called alternate bearing.
Yeah.
So the alternate bearing phenomena means if you have a heavy crop this year, you're not going to have a crop next year. So if we had a way of going in there the years that you have a heavy crop and thinning those pecans, like we can thin apples and peaches and plums and nectarines, not as easy to do with 100, with a large full-size pecan tree. I know that some of the commercial growers have tried to shake those trees, but if you shake it too much, you'll shake all of them off.
Right.
And so that's the deal.
All right, Mr. Voges, Mr. D, thanks for being here today. We're out of time. Remember, we love to hear from you. send us a letter or an email with your gardening questions. Send your email to familyplot@wkno.org. The mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee, 38016. We've got one more episode before we go dormant for the winter. But remember, you can watch past shows online, and you can always call or stop by your county extension office with your gardening questions. I'm Chris Cooper. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next time for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by Good Winds Landscape and Garden Center in Germantown since 1943 and continuing to offer its plants for successful gardening with 7 greenhouses and 3 acres of plants, plus comprehensive landscape services. International Paper Foundation, the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.